Hello, and welcome to Access Humboldt's Community Voices. My name is Paul Bressoud, and I'll be your host. Tonight, we're speaking with Cutcha Risling-Baldy, Assistant Professor and Department Chair of the Native American Studies Program at Humboldt State University. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It's glad. I've read the materials that were presented and see that you do work in a topic called Indigenous feminism, and I need help. I need that explained. What is Indigenous feminism?
I would describe it as acknowledging the fact that we've always had feminism in Indigenous cultures, that, prior to the influx of people here from other places, we really valued women and thought about them as being important to in a society, and we wanted an equal society. And you don't learn that a lot about Native cultures, but we centered women in what we did, and we thought about the fact that we wanted genders to be treated equally. We wanted them to all have equal rights, equal abilities, and I think that it was a very feminist way of thinking. So when you're talking about Indigenous feminisms, you're talking about acknowledging that that has always been there, and that now if we want to build stronger people and nations and futures, we need to have that as a part of it.
Do you find in your studies of Indigenous feminism that California Native cultures treated women with much more respect?
Then currently, yes, they did, definitely.
And why would you say that? What examples would you give of that?
Well, if you look at an Indigenous culture in California, sort of prior to contact, you're talking about women being able to decide who they marry, decide who they divorce, own property. They were the ones who could decide on certain political things like war, if war was going to start or end. They were thought of as very central to government decisions. They had the ability to own regalia. They were doctors. They were leaders. In a colonial culture, women couldn't even decide who they would marry or if they could divorce. And at the time, Indigenous culture said, domestic violence, violence against people in relationships is totally unacceptable. And then at the same time, colonial culture is saying domestic violence is not illegal, and it's actually women that would be put in jail if they ran away from their husbands. So you see a very different way that they're treating women.
How did you go about finding this out, studying this? Is this documented? Is this by talking to elders?
It's both talking to elders. It's documented through stories. A lot of it comes from our oral histories, the ways that we conceive of our religion and spirituality. When you look at who the leaders are that we bring forward, so there's lots of stories about people going to women or talking about women leaders, especially prior to contact, but then when big moments happen, so the mission and the gold rush. There's really a lot of really big moments that involve Native women as leaders in those contexts.
And as you started studying Native cultures, did you say, wow, this is great. This is women empowerment. Is this something that you were able to get interested in right off in your early part of your study?
I think I grew up knowing that we really valued women, strong women, that we valued all genders.
Were you told that as a young person?
Definitely. And I think because of the way we think about the land and we sort of understand our relationship to land, we were talked to in a way that sort of said, the way we treat the land is the way we treat our women. It's the way we understand how we treat people in society. So I could see those connections growing up. And when I would start reading about what other people were researching and doing the research myself, it became very obvious to me that my feeling about who we are as Indigenous peoples is definitely what we were doing.
Does it surprise your students when they find out that California Native cultures have this type of history?
It does, and I think that's because of a colonial history that tries to turn us into like the primitive hunter-gatherer savages that they wanted Native people to be, which we were not. We were very philosophical. We had a lot of law and policy. We had really complex societies. They try to erase that from history, so that when students come, they get very interested in what we're able to fill in that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
That's so fascinating. I want to ask you about the book that you wrote as well. We Are Dancing for You, Native Feminism and the Revitalization of Women's Coming of Age Ceremonies. Researching ceremonies, tell us about that.
The book is actually really about the fact that our community in Hoopa had come together and said that they wanted to start doing our women's ceremony again.
Okay, let me ask again. once again, does that come from stories? Does that come from elders that you find out that these ceremonies used to exist?
It comes from elders. They carried it on. I actually find it very beautiful that even with all of the genocide that happened to us in our communities, elders made it a point to carry on our ceremonies. And with some of them, they knew that we couldn't do them in the same way because of what was happening, but that they were going to move pieces forward. And so with the research we were doing, what I found out was like all of these elders had pieces that they had carried forward that they wanted to make sure that they told us about, that we knew. And it never left our imagination of who we are. We always knew we had a women's ceremony. It just became, how are we going to start doing it again?
So let me ask that. Now, you say some people have certain pieces. How do you go about starting that journey to find that out?
They actually, I think, made it a point to always bring it up.
And they came to you with the information?
And so they came to lots of people with the information. They used to do demonstrations in the schools. They used to come and talk to different groups of students. They would go to people who were doing work in education, and they'd say, we want to talk to you about this. In language, when they would do language classes, they would say, we want to talk about this ceremony. So it was really, I think multiple elders sort of said, this is what's going to happen. It was just a matter of how they were going to figure out who was going to sort of really take it up and make it happen.
So do you have a good idea of the ceremonies that are out there that you've studied, or maybe ceremonies that are out there that you would like to study?
Yeah, there's more that we're working on. I think we're bringing back a lot because we're seeing that in this time period, our culture and ceremony is really important to understanding the kind of people that we want to be in the future, and that the reason why we had to make compromises about that was because of genocide, and now it's time for us to really move forward and heal, and I think we're doing that in a really good way.
The moving forward, is there a passing on of the tradition to the people that you're getting involved to tell them, hey, you're going to have to be the ones as elders talking about this to next generations and helping keep this ceremony alive?
I think we understand that. I think that we're very thoughtful now about the ways in which we do things because we want our young people to be very invested in our culture and our ceremony, so we bring it into all aspects of what we do. And I think things like the Native American Studies Department gives people the opportunity to see if you're going to do any kind of work in communities with Native people, really culture and ceremony needs to be the base of how you understand the ways we're going to address a lot of the issues that face Native people.
What about just contact, too? Getting a hold of people, interviewing people, making those connections? Do you find students able to do that nowadays as far as the legwork it takes?
I think students are very invested in that. And I think that they get very interested in what we can bring as Native American Studies to helping them to do the kind of work that they want to do that's community-based. Because Native American Studies is really a great discipline to sort of introduce you to how you start to work in community in a way that doesn't exploit or just take. It actually gives back when you're doing research, like you're giving back to the community that you work with.
Are you teaching the students, you must, I would like to know how, the ground rules of how to go out there and get this information?
Definitely, and also sometimes this idea of should they be the ones doing it or who should be doing it and how do they support the people that can? And I do think that it's a lot of sort of intervening on the ways in which people used to enter into Indigenous communities as sort of an extractive way of just getting as much information as possible, and instead saying, what do communities need, and how is the work you're doing going to support what they need?
Let me ask about something you just said as far as should they be the ones out asking these questions. Is that, a college student as opposed to somebody who is a community member or part of the community?
Yeah, or somebody that knows the community and has been involved in things. Usually when people come to me and they're like, I really want to talk to somebody about this, I'll say, well, you need to start by getting to know the community. So you need to support the events that they're doing. You need to go and visit with them. You need to go to their public meetings. You need to go to their public events and fairs. You need to be a person who is of the community and understands it before you can actually go in and try to do this work.
That's very impressive. And students they buy into that. They like that.
Because for me, research it's not short. It takes a while. And really meaningful research is about how you can really think about the difference that you're making in that community. And so I think that, students become interested in the fact that it's a little bit different than work. It's more relationship. It's relationship building.
How much of the research, I'm going to try it again, how much of the research is interview-based?
A lot of it, I think, is interview-based, but really what they call sort of community participatory research. So it's working with the community about the research that they want to see and asking them sort of what would you do and how would you put this together, having them sort of come and talk to you and then doing research based on both those interviews but also the way that they kind of help shape what you're going to do.
Now you work with state organizations as well, correct? Is that something that's talked about, how people are going about getting information and researching cultures at this time?
It is more and more. I actually am on a grant right now with Two Feathers Native American Family Services, and the state grant that they're working on is really about community-based research. And so instead of coming in and saying, we're going to do a program for youth that looks like this, we spent a lot of time, almost a year, with the community saying, what would a program look like for you? What would you like to see happen with the youth? How would you like to see this put together? And out of all of that consultation came a program that now we're implementing.
And then is that the way you approach a community, asking them what they would like and then asking the questions from there?
Yeah, definitely. I think it makes for more powerful research, but also more powerful programming. So the program at Two Feathers, which is called the Acorn Youth Wellness Program, is now something that I think the community really feels excited about because they saw how it came together. And then they actually trust it more because they know that multiple people from the community gave feedback as to what it was supposed to look like.
That's so interesting. What if you have a specific interest in, say, a ceremony like you did, the coming of age ceremony, and you go to a community and they want to be looking at some other aspect of their culture? How do you reconcile that?
I think you adapt, change, see what comes out of it. The work that we do in Native American Studies is always saying you get more out of it in that way. What comes out of it is actually going to probably be much better than what you would have thought. It's creating together, it's building relationship together, it's building responsibility together, and you get something really beautiful out of it. And I think most of the time the people that you work with are trying to help you as much as you're trying to help them. And so what develops becomes really beautiful. And you just have to kind of be open to that.
It would be magnificent. It would be like gems that
Yeah.
you would find. That's fantastic. Well, I mean, I wish, speaking of fantastic, great to have you here. That's about all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank my guest, Cutcha Risling-Baldy, for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And for our audience, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Community Voices.
Pretty.